joined by Laura Blumenfeld. She's former US State Department official and a Middle East analyst at Johns Hopkins University. Thanks for joining us here once again on BBC News, Laura. We heard from a man on the ground in Syria earlier in the programme, and he said Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to get away from his own problems by splitting the Middle East. What do you make of that viewpoint?
You know, as listening to this report, I'm just reminded that a week ago at this very moment, today, I was at the White House, actually at Blair House, in the same room with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And as he talked about the region, he said that the opportunities, and he included Syria and Lebanon and, a host of other countries, he described the opportunities as mind-boggling. But it just shows you a week later just how fragile all these opportunities are. I think the heart of the problem is after October 7th, the only thing that the Prime Minister of Israel and many Israelis trust is their trigger finger. I think that they're kind of pursuing this kind of bubble-wrapped border policy where they're trying to create demilitarized zones all around them and won't tolerate any disorder at the border. I think that's one of the very important lessons that they're drawing from that Hamas surprise attack of October 7th.
Given that we're seeing simultaneous attacks on Syria, on Lebanon, obviously a continuing situation in Gaza, what is the risk of a really big, intense instability in the region?
Well, for all the fighting and all the bloodletting and all the loss, Israel risks, if they might say that they won the war, but they're going to lose the peace. And that's what we're looking forward to for the next generation. It's what I worked on at the State Department when I was there as a senior policy advisor on the Israeli policy negotiating team. So I think that there has to be a psychological pivot in addition to a military pivot. I don't know how they're going to get there, though, while Hamas is holding the hostages, which is why today even President Trump said, good news on Gaza. He announced kind of apropos of nothing. But I do have a feeling it is apropos of something, which is he's meeting with Gulf leaders today. And for Donald Trump, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for him, for his number one priority, which is the economy, is that gold pot sitting out there in the Gulf. And the Gulf can't move forward with any of their economic development, whether it's at home or helping Gaza rehabilitate, until there's a ceasefire. I kind of think of it almost like a regional Rubik's Cube, where getting that ceasefire in Gaza is like solving the White Cross.
And on the ceasefire in Gaza, you mentioned what the president said today. We heard from Steve Witkoff, the envoy, as well, saying the negotiations were going good. But we have heard that a lot from both of them in the last week or so, and yet we see the talks in Qatar not reporting much progress. So what do you think when they say it's going good? What does that mean at this point?
Well, thank you for asking that, because at this point, yes, we've been fooled so many times. And sometimes I think they just kind of leak out a little bit of optimism to kind of keep us hopeful while they strike their deals, whether it was a year ago during the Democratic National Convention. I remember Biden talked about we're close to a ceasefire, or more recently when Netanyahu was on his way to the region. And again, we were close to a ceasefire. And that kind of gives them some breathing room to negotiate whatever, side deals they're after. But I do believe that this time we are getting close. If no other reason, like I started to say at the beginning of my comments, I was in the room with Prime Minister Netanyahu a week ago. At the end of his remarks, he said, we will now sing the national anthem, the Hatikva, and I'd like to call upon the hostage families who are in the room to join me on stage. But what happened then was, rather than singing that national anthem, the hostage families surrounded the prime minister, and he was sort of ushered off by security into a private space because there was such a kind of overwhelming demand and emotion demanding for accountability to bring the hostages home. I think if you can unlock that, you unlock the regional opportunities for peace.
Okay, well, we'll wait to see what happens. Of course, that dire humanitarian situation continuing there as well. Laura Blumenfeld, former US State Department official and Middle East analyst at Johns Hopkins University, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC News.
Thank you.